Licorice Pizza is the most recent movie from Paul Thomas Anderson, a movie that has sparked more than one controversy, and still, it is being praised by critics and has been winning awards for Best Original Script, which is causing the conversation around the movie and its themes to grow bigger and bigger. And it is probably going to come to its peak once the Oscars are over. Whether it wins or loses, it's going to spark the discussion online even more. In this video, I want to specifically focus on the consistent topic of the movie, the age gap. I want to take a look at the two sides of the coin and how the current social climate is always an important factor on the legacy of art and media. So, is Licorice Pizza truly that problematic? Licorice Pizza is about the romance between a 25-year-old woman and a 15-year-old teenage boy, leaving a 10 years difference among the protagonists of this love story. In the last couple of years, the conversation about healthy and toxic age gaps has sparked, and terms like grooming, pedophilia, and power dynamics have been popularized. Therefore, one of the two biggest criticisms this movie has been subjected to has to do with how predatory the romance in the movie is. Well, I don't think the movie can be called predatory. I do think the execution of the age gap trope was ultimately the biggest flaw in the story. At the beginning of the movie, it is Gary who quickly falls for Alana. He chases her down the corridor, flaunting his best lines in hopes of getting her attention. Alana immediately establishes all the reasons why they cannot be together. She is saying the relationship would be illegal, and she is treating him like a kid with a silly crush on her. As she dispatches Gary so she can go back to working with a smile on her face, an older man spanks her and she loses the smile. Here, we immediately see the difference on how this young boy is treating her versus how an older guy does. Later that day, despite all of the reasons why she shouldn't be leading this kid on, she goes to the date with him. And it is pretty clear that she is not 100% convinced with what she is doing. Then, why did she go? Well, because Alana is a character in desperate need of validation, and the only person who seems to give it to her is Gary. Through the movie, Alana meets different guys and they are all in different age ranges. She even goes to dinner with Jack Holden, who is significantly older than her, going back to the age gap thematic. He is practically the opposite of Gary, and we see yet again how no one acts their age. Some wish to be older and others wish to be forever young. During their dinner together, Alana asks him if he thinks she is sexy and if he really will remember her name. Again, she is looking to be validated as a woman. Through the movie, the only person validating her is Gary, someone who also doesn't act his age. He is basically a little adult, and sometimes he even has more maturity and awareness than his adult counterparts, something we can notice with his parents. I personally think Alana is not a predatory character. Her dynamic with Gary is an actual nice contrast of a woman who is lost in her age and feels she will never get her act together, against this boy who is still so young and yet has had more success than her in life. So, what failed? Making a movie about a romance between a 15-year-old and a 25-year-old isn't inherently a recipe for disaster. But sadly, in Licorice Pizza, there were decisions that turned a dynamic with a lot of possibilities of being the incentive the characters needed to do some inner changes and grow into actual romance. The scenes that caused me major discomfort through the movie was when Alana got topless in front of Gary, and then later in the movie when Gary and Alana are laying on the waterbed and he sneaks a hand to grab one of her breasts. In those moments, the relationship threatened to become sexual, and the idea of an intimacy of such level existing between them, well, is troubling. This is not a problem only because of the age gap, but also the type of romance that is building among Gary and Alana is a problem too. Gary is slowly being more controlling towards Alana, getting irritated at the idea of anyone else seeing her body but not him. As they are building Alana's acting profile, he's acting like her guardian and she is the child. This, unlike the start of the movie when Alana took Gary to New York as his guardian for the trip. Alana showed herself in just a last-minute attempt to please and appease Gary. Every man in the movie somehow considers Alana as nothing but an object of desire, and Gary isn't any better. And the obvious last problem with the age gap is the ending of the movie. Alana saying I love you to Gary and they sharing a kiss is not as gratifying as it would have been if the two main characters were of legal age. I just cannot see the silver lining on a relationship that is basically illegal. This movie is a coming of age, meaning the characters must have grown or learned an important lesson in their youth that would have shaped them forever. But if Alana accepted hanging out with Gary because she needed any type of validation and at the end she ends up with Gary, I don't see what lesson was learning there. We can say Alana stopped trying to get validation and went for what she wanted, and that was Gary. But not caring about what anyone thinks about your relationship with a 15-year-old when you are 25, it's not something to be proud of, really. It also doesn't talk much better of Gary. Yes, he got what he wanted, I guess, but he's still a kid trapped in an adult's world. In Licorice Pizza, the age gap only damaged what should have been a fulfilling ending, as it was written on a Screen Rant review of the movie. Alana and Gary drive each other crazy because they both use each other to make themselves feel less insecure and they enjoy feeling needed, so they love each other in a messed up, self-serving type of way. I love this paragraph because it encapsulates their relationship. Gary behaves like an adult and being with an older woman cements this feeling in him, while Alana feels like she's getting her life together when being with someone successful. The ending also doesn't open much possibilities. The relationship is illegal and it won't be able to go any further. And maybe that was the point. Maybe it was to represent an ephemeral moment of happiness despite knowing it will only lead to a heartbreak. But again, it's still illegal, and it was a bold choice to have the movie ending with a kiss and a love declaration. The major problem with the age gap is that there is no useful reason for it to turn romantic. The contrast between a kid who has his life together and an adult woman that has no idea where to go is interesting to explore. However, you don't need to love someone romantically for them to be an important presence in your life. Friendships can be equally or sometimes more powerful than a romance. It could have been a beautiful ending for them to realize how much they matter to each other and not have them kissing. Less having the adult among the two be the one saying I love you. There are movies where the age gap trope has been done for a useful reason for the characters, such as The Garden of Words and American Beauty. In both movies, the age gap helped to contrast the weaknesses and faults of the grown-ups and how the youthful outlook of their teen counterparts helped them. Yet, in neither of those two movies, they end up together. Licorice Pizza made me incredibly disappointed because it is a very well-made movie. The changes, ups and downs in the relationship between Alana and Gary are very well written as well. It makes sense why they keep each other around and why they value each other. But again, sadly, the illegal romance among characters might have stained what was so well built. Not every movie has to have a moral lesson or straightforward say something is wrong for it to be a good movie. Personally, I do think Licorice Pizza works perfectly fine as it is, but the ending painted was a sad one for Alana. She ended up where she started and she never really broke her necessity of validation. She would still do anything to get it, even if it meant staying with a younger teenager who sees her more like an object of success than a person to get it.